Because oftentimes there's this argument of, oh, when you have that issue, go for deliverance. But, a lot, I don't know if many people don't know or they do know, but you have to take care of your soul. You have to take care of the process of the fragment, the damage that happened from when you were a child. Is it that we need to be educated in the church to understand these different levels of care and support that we need, as well as our spirituality, or are we trading one for
So I
another?
love to remind people like that mundane piece that you're doing for that year that you feel like, oh my gosh, you're just trying to survive till one is actually super important for their development as an adult. And for me, that would be my next, another thing I like to talk to people about a lot is I like to look at parenting from the big picture. So instead of zooming out to every little decision, looking at it from the big picture. And for me, the big picture is that we're trying to raise amazing adults. We're not raising children, we're raising adults.
Welcome to Build the Life You Love, where vision meets action and stories turn into legacies. Here, entrepreneurs, leaders, creators, and builders share not just the battles they have faced, but also the lives they are building boldly. If you're ready to dream bigger, build smarter, and live fully, you are in the right place. Welcome to another episode of Build the Life You Love. I'm your host, Dylis Chi. And today I have a conversation that is going to speak directly to the parts of you that would wonder if it's too late, if you've gone too far, or if the redirection in your life could really be God's protection. You're going to come into insight and wisdom that will make you say, where have these insight and wisdom be all, where has it been all my life? Because it's going to make wherever you are have lots of meaning. And you're going to understand what God is doing and what life is doing with you, even in that situation you thought was the end. You're gonna know that it was all a redirection to a life that you could never even imagine. Our guest today is Emmy, and she's someone who has walked that path. Amy is a speaker, a licensed therapist. She's a writer, encourager, and a super mom with a voice full of faith and hope, compassion, and fire. She spent the last 26 years centering her life on motherhood and building a career that supports moms across the lifespan to become the healthiest, happiest, and most whole versions of themselves. She's the host of Everyday Supermoms podcast and a powerful advocate for women healing from past wounds and thriving in their unique gifts and strengths. But before all of these amazing things that Amy is doing right now, there was a moment most people would label failure or a mistake. At 17, Amy found herself pregnant, and what could have been her undoing became a divine redirection. The child became the beginning of some of the best things she ever would experience. Her purpose opened up from there, a whole new world opened, and the foundation of her work and ministry came out of there. Amy, welcome and thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor to have you join me on this conversation. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to this conversation from the last time we met.
Mhm.
Because when we met, the conversation was really good that time, and I thought if it was this good, I wonder what this episode is going to look like. So I want to start from the beginning, where you're 17 years old, you're at school, you're pregnant, scared, but surrounded by a loving Christian community. So
Mhm.
many people will call that a failure, but you
Mm.
call it a redirection. What made
Mhm.
you say it that way? What happened? Can you take us to that time of your life?
Yeah. I think I'll take you even a little bit before then. So a little bit of backstory is I was young, and so much of my heart was focused on loving and being loved. In a lot of ways, I sought that out in dating relationships and wanting to feel loved by the guys I was dating, which in high school are, not very deep. Um,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
and so I had a lot of value that came from that. And it wasn't until I was 16 in my senior year of high school that I found a personal relationship with God. And it was through that I started filling my heart with that relationship. And I found meaning and purpose. And so I started to shift my light. I started to shift my life away from being focused on all those needs toward, faith and, friendships and all these other things. So by the time I entered college, I was convinced that I was going to become a doctor. I had wanted to be a doctor since I was little. I envisioned going and being a cardiovascular surgeon, actually, was my vision. It was like, I didn't even just want to be like, oh, yeah, I want to be a doctor. I wanted to shoot high. And I had this vision for doing that. I assumed like I still had a desire in my heart for human relationship and I wanted to find somebody to love and to be loved by. But I was also committed to waiting until I was married to have sex. And however, show up at college and, there's all this freedom and excitement and all these things. And I met this cute guy and I was on the dance team at my college and he was a cheerleader. Um, and yeah. And so I,
Combination. That was a firing combination. You couldn't resist it. Both of you.
yeah, yeah, we were both very, outgoing and like a lot of those kinds of things. And so we connected really well but we had, kept things slow and then one night we went from kisses goodbye to wanna come in? And in that one night it went from 0 to 60 and I remember the next morning being like, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Like, this is not how we set a foundation for a healthy relationship. And so I told him I didn't want to do that anymore. And he's like, okay, like, sure. If you don't want to, I'm not going to force you, but I don't know why. And I told him it was because of my faith that I didn't want to go down that road. And he's like, sure, but I don't think faith has anything to do with it. And that was the first time I realized we might be on different pages. But so here I was, 17. I was young in college because I had skipped a grade and my birthday's in June. So I wouldn't turn 18 until after my first full year in college. And a few weeks later, somebody accused me of being moody and was like, are you on your period or something? And I realized it had been way too long since I'd had a period. And this was around the time of the first midterm exams in college. And I was like, it's probably stress. And I was dancing like 20 plus hours a week on the dance team. And I'm like, oh, these things, it's probably just that. But I was like, I'll go to a pregnancy center. And I went to a pregnancy center. And I remember they were asking me all these symptoms of pregnancy. And every single one, I was like, yep, yep, yep. Oh, yep,
Checking out.
yep. Yeah, like literally every single one. And I was like, oh. Before they even got to the point of like showing me the pregnancy test, I was like, yeah. And so they told me I was pregnant. And I remember in that moment, I kind of fell apart and I just sat there and I wept. And I was so thankful because I had these two amazing women in the room with me, and they were both women of faith as well, and really passionate about supporting women as well. And they let me cry for a second. And once I like stopped hyperventilating, they asked if they could pray for me. And in that moment, I don't remember what they prayed, but in that moment, it was kind of like this reminder that it didn't matter if I had, quote, screwed up or if I had taken the wrong path, that God was right there, ready and willing to take it from here. And it was so powerful. And literally, like I said, I don't remember the prayer. So if you're ever worried to like pray for somebody, just the fact that you're praying for them could be enough. So they prayed with me. And that was the moment where I said, okay, God, I clearly don't make great decisions or I wouldn't be 17 and pregnant. So from here on out, I need you to help me with this. I need you to help me decide what to do with this baby. And I spent my entire pregnancy praying fervently, like I've never prayed before since, for God to give me a sign of whether he wanted me to choose adoption or parenting. And I figured with adoption, I could keep going on a lot of my life plans. I could still easily go on to med school. I could, have the traditional get married, then have kids life. With parenting, it would be a completely different road and something I had never imagined. And so, logically, while I knew choosing adoption would be emotionally very hard, um, I also felt like practically it made a lot of sense.
Right.
Um, so I prayed my whole pregnancy. And I was like really hoping he'd give me like a neon sign, like flashing above my bed in the middle of the night saying, parent this child, or you should do adoption. But that's not how it happened. But I looked at both directions the whole time because God does call us to use our brains, right?
Right.
Um, and I met with an adoption counselor and I looked at all those pieces of the puzzle. And I met with a girl who had placed her child in adoption weekly to process through the emotional part of it. What had she been through? What would that look like for me? And I also looked into what financial aid could I get in order to, if I were to choose to parent, could I still finish my degree? Could I still pursue goals? And I'm going to bring it to the short version of the story because the long version is much longer. But God made it abundantly clear in His time what direction I was supposed to take. He closed the door to adoption. Um, I kept trying to meet with my adoption counselor, and the short version is there were 7 times that we scheduled and had to cancel. And I remember saying, if I can't meet with an adoption counselor, I can't do adoption. And it was like, oh,
Mhm.
oh. So the door was closed, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to parent. But here I was at this point. I had been having preterm labor for over a month. I was 35 weeks pregnant and hadn't prepared to have a baby yet because I was still holding both.
Mhm.
And in that time, um, everything fell into place. I got a crib, I got like all the things I needed. And 1 week later, a month before her due date, I had my oldest daughter.
Wow.
So,
Gosh, your
yeah,
body bones.
yes.
So she came really early as well.
Yes. So I had some complications that led to preterm labor,
Right.
and my water broke 4 weeks before her due date. And she was huge though for a 4 week early. She was almost
Yeah.
7 pounds, and and she was super healthy. She had some jaundice, but and I immediately fell in love. And I was not somebody who always dreamt of becoming a mom. Like I wasn't the kid who like played with the baby dolls all the time and was like, I just can't wait to be a mom. Like, I didn't not want to be a mom, but it wasn't that big of a part of my vision. And then I'm holding this baby and I can't even imagine the world without her.
Wow.
And it was like, you know, to be clear, not all moms have that immediate pivot.
Right.
Don't immediately fall in love with that baby. Don't immediately feel that attachment. So if you're that mom, there's nothing wrong with you. I do a lot of work with moms who, it
Or
develops
feel
later.
that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
that's interesting. What would be, in case someone is listening, let's like
Hmm.
divert a little bit. What would be the reason, some of the reasons that would make mom not have this instant connection or
Oh,
affect?
there's a long list of reasons. It could be problems, health problems that you had as the mom during your pregnancy or during your labor and delivery, complications from those. It could be hormonal struggles. It could be maybe if before you had a baby, you had any mental health challenges like depression,
Yeah.
anxiety, those can do it. It could be having a lot of fears about motherhood. It could be maybe you weren't 100% sure you wanted to be a mom, and here's this baby, and do I really, oh my gosh, do I want this yet? It could be the fact that, frankly, you are so freaking exhausted after
Yeah.
birthing a child, physically,
Okay.
emotionally, everything,
Yeah.
that it's hard to feel a lot of things.
Good.
So, honestly, it's more common than people talk about. I think this is something that often moms will come to me in therapy because they're like, I don't feel that with my baby. And everybody says you're supposed to. And that's why I wanted to make that little comment was that, like, if you're a mom if you're a mom that hasn't felt that right at the beginning, that doesn't mean you won't develop it later. And that's okay. Like
So what,
sometimes it's a slow burn.
right, okay. So how slow could it go? Like the very slow one could be years later.
It could be. You know, I think we all kind of have our ages that we love the most in children. Some people love that newborn baby stage. They want to just snuggle that limp little snuggly little mushy baby. And some people are like, ugh, this is just a lot of work. Some people love the toddler stage when they're learning things every, 2 seconds and they're growing. I like there's so much cool about the toddler stage or the elementary. Some people love the teenage stage and other people love the adult child stage. Now, hopefully you're bonding and attaching well before the adult child, child stage,
Which is important.
but it is not abnormal for it to take, especially months for a mom to really feel that connection as she really starts diving into it. And if you, as a mom, are listening to this and you worry, therapy can be a great way for you to work on that bond and that attachment and to increase those feelings because they do feel good.
Mm, I would imagine, yeah. So, how did that experience shift your identity? Did it have any impact on who you were becoming as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to who you were before? Obviously, having a child would
Yeah.
change a lot of things in a human
Mm-hmm.
about your identity. How did you begin to shift into
Yeah.
aligning?
So many ways. I feel like the shift into motherhood is a huge life transition. There's a word for it, matrescence, and it's that process of becoming a mother, basically. And a lot of moms look at, their life pre-motherhood and their life post-motherhood. In my podcast, I'll often ask the moms that are on my show, like, what was life like for you before motherhood? And so many are like, oh, that's hard to remember. Like it's this whole other world sometimes. But then you become a mom and so many things shift. You're no longer just responsible for yourself and not only responsible for, but you kind of don't even really have control over your life in the same way. Before you have kids, you can, make a lot of decisions of when do I sleep and when do I eat and can I go to the bathroom by myself? And then you have children and all of those things shift immediately. And um, you know, what you do with your time and, meeting your basic needs. I remember feeling like I just want to take a shower when I want to shower. like,
Yeah.
or like I'd be baby wearing to hold that newborn while I went to the bathroom because I couldn't. I had a couple babies. One of my babies was super clingy and I couldn't put her down or she'd scream her head off. And so I'd be baby wearing to go to the bathroom and all of those things. But I remember with my firstborn, so I had her 2 weeks before I turned 18. So basically, right at the same time as I was becoming an adult and figuring out who I was also becoming a mom. And so I'm surrounded. I did go right back to school. I lived in family housing on my university campus and continued my degree. And so on in the family housing, there were some other families, but like my community was mostly, young adults that got to make all their decisions for themselves. And like, we're planning to go out at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And this mama was not doing that. So it impacted like my friendship development. Um, I wasn't a big partier, honestly, before I became a mom, but I definitely wasn't after,
Mhm.
because it just was like, I don't want to go. That's not how I want to spend my time. But I also don't want to have the next day like feeling like butt while I'm trying to take care of a baby. So yeah, so I think it changed a lot of things for me, and obviously it made me grow up real fast. Like it made me really focus on my child a lot more versus just myself. It made me focus on how will this decision impact her, not just how will it impact me. So whether it was career decisions or whatever, and I did drop the pre med. I realized that I did not want to spend the first 12 years of her life in school, which realistically it would have been somewhere around that. And then I thought about like residency and all these different phases of becoming a doctor, especially a surgeon. And I was like, that's not the life I want. Like, I have this new value of wanting to be this little girl's mom. And I know based on my pregnancy story that God has called me to be this little girl's mom. So nothing else gets to trump that. So every decision I made was filtered through that. If I know I was called to this, and I'm not sure about that, and that doesn't work with this,
Hmm.
we now know.
Yeah. So how did you embrace who you are now, a therapist? Was that like a very natural transition, natural thing that you grew into with this new beautiful life and values that you are now developing for yourself?
Yeah. So Um, in her first 6 months of life, I didn't take traditional classes. I took correspondence courses, which for those young people out there are old school, where you would write papers and mail them to your teacher, and they would grade them and mail them back to you. Like this was even not even email based. This was literally put it in the mail. And I'd
Wow.
have to, yeah, it was like, this is one of those moments where I suddenly feel old. Um,
No, you're not. You look so young.
but like we would do that. I did that in one of the courses I took was psychology. And it was the first taste I had had of it. And I was like, oh, this stuff is fascinating. And it was like, it came really naturally to me. And I really liked it. So I decided my majors in undergrad were communication, focusing on interpersonal communication, and psychology. And I was like, this stuff is fascinating. And I would really like to help other people. And since that, the helper part that wanted to be a doctor got to continue in a new way. I have, in a cheesy way, said I thought I was going to help hearts in one way, but it's actually like the metaphorical heart instead of the physical one. Um,
I see it.
I went on. She was 3 years old when I graduated from college, at the top of my class,
Wow.
um, and two majors and a 3-year old kid, and went on and I got two master's degrees, and became a therapist. And I've worked in a lot of different jobs, but where I kept getting pulled back to were jobs that worked with moms. So I've worked in foster care, and I've worked in home family therapy, and I've done reunification therapy and all sorts of things, but I kept being drawn to the moms.
What was making you stay with the work with mom? What did you could you tell, or you were just feeling the natural pull to it? What was that thing that kept making you stay there with moms?
You know, it was such a natural pull. Being a mother has been the greatest joy of my life. And I know that for so many people, that's not the case. That it can feel like a burden, that it can feel overwhelming. You can get burnt out. You can really struggle in it, and that you look at it and it's just like, I love my kid, but I don't love being a mom. And a surprising number of moms feel that way and hide it because they feel ashamed that they're supposed to love it. That, you know, you see all these other moms in the world or on social media smiling with their kids and like talking about how much they love them. And there's a lot of moms out there that are like, is that fake? Like, because I love my kid, but I'm exhausted all the time and all this. So I got to know all these moms over time, and I wanted to help them to heal the whatever was causing it to be a burden, whatever was burning them out, whatever wounds of their past or traumas or whatever that was causing them to be in a place where they weren't loving being a mom, and helping them to create a motherhood that they really loved. So then, like, shifting it toward, you don't have to do motherhood this way.
Yeah.
You can do it this way. And like, we're all created differently. We all have different strengths. We all have different gifts. We all have different passions and values. And when we can live our lives in line with those things, we thrive. And so that is my biggest passion working with moms, is helping them to create a motherhood that is truly tailored to them and who they were meant to be.
Wow, that's a dream experience for every mom. And I wanna, since we're already into this part of the conversation, motherhood is, like you said, it's not exciting for every mother and
Mm-hmm.
every child's experience of their mother. A lot of, we'll say, maybe daughters have very antagonistic relationships with their moms.
Oh,
And
yes.
yeah, they grow into adulthood and they're still battling and dealing with those issues. So what have you seen? What is the cause of that? I mean, I think you have statistics of that. I wouldn't have numbers, but you meet people, and it's very common to hear it. Yeah, the mother wounding, I didn't feel nurtured. I don't have a connection with my mom, and it's usually the mom and the daughter. So what is going on there? I feel like there is an epidemic of that when it comes
Mm,
to the mother and daughter relationship. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my own experience, it's very common meeting people, myself, coming on that journey to heal that particular wounding. So what is going on? I know we've touched a lot on a lot of things that could give rise to that, but what is it? Because I know you're in foster care, you're in these places that you can see the manifestations of that a lot. So what's
yes.
going in there?
You know, there are so many factors that can cause this mother wound. And I feel like we could do a whole episode just on that. And so when I think about some of the things that I processed with my clients in my therapy, so I have different levels of care that I give people. Locally, I am able to be a therapist to people. I can only be therapist to Colorado-based people, but that we tend to do a lot more deeper trauma work, and that is where you should do trauma work is with a therapist. With the coaching practice that I have, I also do, we still talk about baggage that may be impacting them, but it's not as like horrific baggage typically. If I am coaching somebody and I see like really bad trauma, I'm going to recommend that they also work with a therapist to work through some of those pieces. Um, so, that being said, some of the big things, it could be something like abuse. It could be that they were raised in an abusive or neglectful household. It could be that their parent had a personality disorder, narcissism, borderline. Those are the top ones that really seem to impact the next generation a lot. It could be that their mom was not, maybe they weren't as far as like abusive or neglectful, but they were distracted by other things. Maybe they were, super executive working 80 hours a week, and or maybe it's not even super executive, but maybe due to finances their mom had to work two jobs.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't that their mom wasn't trying to be a good mom, but they had to work their butt off just to feed them. And so they weren't able to do the nurturing, the loving, the connecting, the relationship pieces as well, because there wasn't time to do it. There could be, you know, at a minimum, so many people I talk to can look at their parents and say, I don't want a parent just like them. Um, and they can, even the people who had really phenomenal mothers might be able to say, okay, they did some great things, but I'm not going to do all that. Some of that, not doing. And so I think part of what we face now is we see so many more options of
Right.
motherhood. When you think back to parents who were parenting in like 70s, 80s, and 90s, which are basically, when most people who are parents today were raised, right? Um, those parents were, in the early women's empowerment movement where it's like you can work and you can have it all. And so so many of them were trying to juggle all this
Right.
and like be outside of the mold of the traditional, like, 1950s housewife that's wearing the pearls and the high heels and vacuuming or whatever. And so they're trying to break that mold. And there are a lot of kinks to work out. We're still working out those kinks now, what that looks like. Um, but I think a lot of us, we look back on those ages, some common things that people kind of tend to struggle with, where are things like, even if they weren't abused, maybe their parents just had a heavy hand in discipline. Maybe there was like a lot of, spanking, or, people even saying beating as if it was normal.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of that kind of stuff, or parents that didn't really do things with their kids,
Yeah.
whereas nowadays you get on social media and you see parents painting with their kids and going
True.
for bike rides and all these things. So we're comparing our
Yeah.
lives now with what
Today's
they did.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you. So, where do you think we are? Do you think we're in a much better place in terms of when they were coming out of the mold back in the 50s in the rush of trying to be something different, trying to not be what everybody thought you're going to be? So, where do you think we are now in terms of motherhood and that connection and that balance and affection with the mother and child?
I think some things are a lot better and others are a lot worse. Like, I feel like in two parent households, before it was a choice when moms had to work. And most parents, that I talk to, it's not really a choice anymore. That even a stay at home mom often has a side gig that she's making some sort of income on, because they need it financially. And so, from a financial perspective, I feel like there's more pressure on women. And that so many women feel like they both need to be a working mom and a stay at home mom. They need to do them both. Like, so they need to be doing all the things that the stay-at-home mom would do, and showing up in like the classroom to volunteer, and taking their kids to all the doctor's appointments, and also being like working up the ladder in their company or whatever, and making six figures or whatever it might be they've set as a goal for themselves. And so I feel like we've now been like, we can do it all in like a true sense, like, which is just not realistic. We still only have 24 hours in a day. We still only have so much energy. And I think women are now calling out that burden. They're calling out the mental load. They're calling out all these things. And I think there's a increase of dissatisfaction because we're all so dang exhausted.
Right.
And we have a lot more of the comparison trap because of social media. So, like, on one hand, we have the ability to search anything we want. So even when I had my oldest daughter 26 years ago, Google was not a thing. I love to also date myself that way. Like, if I had a question, I couldn't whip out a smartphone and Google,
Yeah.
should I be worried about this diaper rash or something? Like, that wasn't an option. So back before we had all that accessibility, we would talk to our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors, our friends. Well, if you don't have a village, what do you do back then? And so a lot of people in previous generations were just passing on whatever they had,
Yeah.
whether that was good or bad.
Yeah.
So now we have the ability to see all these other options and be like, oh,
Yeah.
I never thought of parenting that way.
Mhm.
Oh, I've never thought of that. So the good and bad of that is we can get really stuck in overthinking because it's so much information, and we can know better. Previous generations, like, there's a reality to which some people were never told certain things about child development, or nope. Like, I remember asking my mom, like, how come you never tried any other types of discipline other than spanking? And she's like, I didn't know what other options there were.
That's a good answer
Mm-hmm.
from their
And
generation.
it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think so many people are now trying to figure out other options,
Yeah.
because they don't want to necessarily go that path. And then they're like, oh my gosh, what do I choose? So I think that there's pros and cons to all the generations. Like, when I think back, people are like always like saying how terrible the 1950s housewife is. And there's certainly some problems with it.
Right.
And when I think about it, I'm like, if all I was expected to do was cook dinner and keep a house looking clean, and
You take that.
I'd do some book clubs and martini nights, that sounds okay. Like,
That sounds good enough, isn't it? Compared to what we have now. So it's always like very relative to the generation and the people, depending on where we've come from. So
mm-hmm,
when you were sharing that, I was thinking like I know motherhood will be different from for everybody, but there are some important things that are needed to be able to build that developmental stage of a child. I
mm-hmm,
would I would like if you can share some of those for the moms who want to get a tip or two or some practical things that can be, even for those that didn't know about it, if they hear it right now, they can begin to implement it with their babies that is young, and so that those babies will grow up, stable and being able to integrate into society as real, well, emotional developed adults as well. So, what are some of those things that are very good for the baby that
mm-hmm.
needs that should not be ignored or it can be met some other ways? Give ways that mothers can really bond and be there for their child the way they should.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is I am very relationship based in parenting. And what I mean by that, that doesn't mean like we don't do discipline or that we don't have routines or structure or any of those things. but everything I make sure that I value the relationship first. So, what that looks like is being intentional throughout the child's life from the time they are itty bitty. So, in that first year of life, what we learn as humans is who we can trust
Wow.
and what it's like to trust somebody and for them to meet our needs. So, for instance, you have a new baby, they cry. Mom goes and she figures out, oh, they're hungry. She feeds them. That baby just learned when I'm in distress, mom fixes it. Now, if that baby cries and say it's 3 in the morning and mom's like, I don't want to get out of bed, and she doesn't respond to it, and she's like, I'm going to sleep train. And this is not to say all sleep training is bad, but oftentimes we're eager to do it a little too early when, say, it's like a 6 week old and you're like, this baby needs to sleep through the night. And so you just let it cry. Here's the thing, that baby doesn't learn to put itself to sleep. That baby learns you're not going to come when it calls.
Wow. Okay.
That is not what we want. And so every time I always tell the new moms that I work with, um, it often feels so mundane what you're doing for that first year, like changing 5 billion diapers and feeding them a zillion times and not sleeping and getting them to sleep and trying to entertain them, and all, like, some of the things that you do in that first year just feel like, does this really matter, or am I just trying to survive this year?
Yeah.
And it is so important because it sets that foundation that they can trust you. It sets that foundation. What they learn when they are between 0 and 1 is that they can trust people. So, not even just you. And so, that babies who have responsive parents in that first year are much more likely to choose responsive partners because they expect that of them.
Okay, Amy, that is huge information. And the question I want to ask you is that somewhere in the process of motherhood, in the process of women being pregnant and having this baby, and this baby growing up to 6 months, 1 year, 1.5, do they teach these moms what you've said? And is there a way these moms get this information, or they just wing it, come into it here and there if they need a therapy? Like, do they have access to this information during the process of being pregnant and getting ready for this baby, and even when this baby comes?
It's in some books, it's not in all the books. Because again, some books are conflicting, like the ones that are pro putting your baby on a schedule, and you hold that baby to a schedule their entire, first year. Okay, I see some benefits to that for sanity for mom. And that means if your baby needs something off schedule, you're not meeting that need, and you might miss that opportunity to build that in them. So, like, that's the hard part, is some of the information is so conflicting. But truly meeting all of those needs in that first year, you can't spoil a baby under 1. So meeting their needs as they need it, like, you know, is huge for their attachment, for their bonding with you and with future partners. Like, and so I love to remind people, like, that mundane piece that you're doing for that year that you feel like, oh my gosh, you're just trying to survive till 1, is actually super important for their development as an adult. And for me, that would be my next another thing I like to talk to people about a lot, is I like to look at parenting from the big picture. So
Mhm.
instead of zooming out to every little decision, looking at it from the big picture. And for me, the big picture is that we're trying to raise amazing adults. We're not raising children, we're raising adults.
Is that a way that a mom can see that big picture, with the level of mundane that she has to deal with? Can she take out herself from that and see that
Hmm.
big picture? Is that
Yeah, I think in so many ways, first, I really encourage parents to get clear about what their big picture is. What is their vision for motherhood? What they want their kids to grow up to be like.
Mhm.
And then once they have that clarity and that vision, to then use that to make all those decisions. So as you're, you know, when you're snuggling that baby, to be able to remind yourself that I'm teaching this baby that it's worthy of being snuggled,
Mhm.
that this baby matters to me, that yes, I will take a pause in my day. Like, trying to think through instead of just being like, I have to hold this baby again, like reminding yourself, no, this matters. And the same thing as you're moving forward at all the other stages, whether it's, the toddlers and, how is giving them this cookie as they're throwing the tantrum going to help right now versus in 20 years? Like, which is going to breed the person that I want them to grow into? When they are in kindergarten and they want, or in elementary aged, young school age kids, if they want to do 72 activities, how does saying yes to that versus no to that help them to become the adult you want them to be? um, when they are a teenager and you're helping them to make decisions, like all of those things, you can look at how, not only what do I think about that today, but how will that matter when they're 30?
That would change everything because I think if our parents thought about that intentionally, they would bring us up differently. They would be present for us. I grew up in a household, both my parents were working, very
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs and working class. You come back home to
Mm-hmm.
your nanny. You
Yeah.
come back home to the maid in the house that cooks and everything, and you see your mom when you see your mom, maybe weekend.
Mm-hmm.
By the time they
Yeah.
come home, you're in bed, getting
Mm-hmm.
ready for school, and then the next day the driver has to take you to school.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're lucky, your mom will pick you up after school.
Yeah.
So if that's such a very important thing that you've said, and I know visioning is good in every area of our lives, but to have
Mm-hmm.
a vision of this beautiful bundle of joy from when they're like 0 day to even from when they're still in the womb, just having a clear picture of what you want it to be, what you're feeling and want it to be, and how you can show up on decisions, and even with your partner if you have one, and have that
Mm-hmm.
vision so you can communicate it to your support system around you. It would
Mm-hmm.
change everything. Do you find that in your work, a lot of women are creating that vision for their child, and
Oh,
how
it's one of the things that I work with all the women that I do. It's like one of the first steps that we do,
how
is
does
really
it
kind
really
of,
help them? How does it really help
oh,
them?
it helps them in so many ways, like you were talking about. Like it helps with the day to day and, what do we do today? And, how do I want to fill the day versus how do I want to fill my week? How do I want to fill my life? It helps them make decisions about, if you're trying to decide what school you want to put your kid
Yeah,
in. And it's like, well, this one lines up better with my values. This one lines up better with who I want them to be. It helps them make career decisions. Well, for me, I could make a lot more money if I saw clients in my evenings, because as a therapist, a lot of people want evening hours.
yeah,
But I chose a long time ago to only have one evening a week that I see clients because the rest of the days I want to be with my kids. And so that value I had, and this is not to shame any mom who chooses something else, but that value I had shaped that career choice. And so, like, I look at all of those pieces of the puzzle and, like, when women are really clear about it, it gives them more peace because eventually you're going to have to say no to things, right? We only have so much time, only have so much energy. But when we have clarity about our big picture, we can use that as a thing to help us make those decisions. Like, you know, how will saying no to this today impact my big picture?
yeah,
If it doesn't, then maybe it's a great thing to say no to. Like, if it does, if this is something that's actually going to impact that, maybe we make space for this and cut something else.
right.
So, like, I think the women that I've seen really take this seriously have gotten so far in just taking that one nugget and applying it. And, like, I do a lot of work with clients of this. I have a program about it. Like, I've talked on a lot of podcasts about it just because I really think that that's the one thing that impacted my parenthood too. I read a book when my daughter was only 2, and it talked about choosing the top 3 character traits that you want your kid to have and really putting your emphasis onto that. And, like, so if it's not one of those top 3, you don't stress about it as much. And that goes to discipline, that goes to decisions, that goes to then being intentional about making sure you're talking about those 3 things. It really colors everything.
That's so good. And it creates boundaries as well. It makes you really focus on the child. And that child will feel nourished, to feel the affection, to feel the intentionality that's coming from you, the energy and all that. That is so good. I want to ask you, because you work with women, and these women come to you because they want to be present for their child, they want to be present for their own lives, their family, they want to be joyful and whole.
Mhm.
But I know that some of them will come feeling exhausted. We already mentioned the exhaustion.
I would say most of them come exhausted.
So most of them come, they're coming for rescue. I'm exhausted when they knock on your door. That's exhausted.
Mhm.
They come exhausted, emotionally fragmented, and they also carrying past wounds. How do you help them begin to heal, especially moms that are carrying some form of mom guilt and stuff? How do you blend all of that um to support them as well as support their motherhood journey? That's a very complex process.
Yeah. A lot of times it's like doing two things at the same time, that we often work on the present while we also work on the past. Um, and how do we make changes now and deal with some of the junk that's impacting you? So in my therapy office, we might go deeper. We might use things like EMDR and brain spotting to get to those deeper levels of trauma. In my coaching, I can use brain spotting also with coaching, but also like we work on what's holding you back. Like, if this is your vision, why aren't you there? Like, what do you think it is? And like, we really try to identify what are those barriers that are getting there. And whether we're talking coaching or therapy, like, we dig in and we find a path that helps to heal the past and move forward with the future. And for some people, they need the deeper therapy work. And I think there's so much value in that. Like, if you're truly looking at it and your mom was abusive or your dad was abusive, or, you know, you had true trauma, like that is impacting you. Again, I say trauma goes to a therapist. Trauma doesn't go to a coach. We're just, you know, there's enough coaches out there that woke up one day and decided to be a coach that have zero training and knowledge and don't, and unfortunately they often do harm. And there are some amazing coaches out there that do, like, so this is not to bash coaches. I am one also. But like, if you've got a lot of baggage, a good coach would tell you, this sounds like something you should talk to a therapist about. And then come right back and we'll keep going and we'll work on the present and we'll work on some other pieces, right?
Goals, yeah.
So, yeah. So I think, you know, usually it's kind of a two pronged approach. I always start first with some self care stuff because moms are notorious for not taking care of ourselves.
Mhm.
And we don't go to like fancy self care, like massages and pedicures, even though those are delightful.
Yeah.
That's not going to help you sustain. We go to basics. I call it the big five: eat, sleep, move, fresh air and sunshine, and spirituality and or community. And when we can get those in line, then we can deal with everything else. But if I start trying to do deep work and like trying to help somebody create a better plan for their life, and they're not eating right, they're not sleeping right, they're not moving their bodies, they're not ever getting outside, and they don't have a spirituality or community practice, it doesn't matter what other brilliant bombs I drop on them. They're going to be struggling.
True. True. Because that really creates, and I think feeling loved and being loved and having that self care, taking care of yourself, making that connection with yourself is really fundamental for every human being. And it makes sense that as a therapist, you begin there. So it brought this question to mind. I have had people on the podcast that come out of incredible, unbelievable trauma, right? And they've come out of it, and I hear what they say about their time with therapists. They've been with so many different therapists, and there's also that thing, that interjection um, with faith.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that because you hear them share different stories. I've also had people who do deliverance within the faith community, and it is, I've had a real interesting combination. Like one therapist that is now doing deliverance, which I thought is a good combination because I said to her that you have the care, you have the understanding to bring that into the deliverance practice. So I know that you're taking care of these people in a very really good way. But there's a lot of controversy or contrast when it comes to the work that a therapist will do and deliverance. And some of these survivors themselves would not approve of therapists in their experience in trying to get healing, and would, name something else to have helped them. And they say only God would help them, only Jesus, only that. So can you speak into that and bring some clarity now that I have you here?
Yeah, gosh, that's a really big topic. So I will try to do it justice in a short-ish response. But yeah, first I want to say that just like any profession, there are great therapists and there are not great therapists. Just like there's great doctors and not great doctors, and great writers and not great writers. Like there are a wide variety of quality as well as training styles and approaches. I always say, in fact, research has shown that therapy really only works if you find the right therapist for you. It's based on the connection you feel with your therapist. So I actually tell my new clients, like, if at any point you feel like you don't connect with me, you don't like me, maybe you hate my smile, maybe you hate my office, maybe you think I talk too much or too little. Like, if for whatever reason I'm not the one for you, go find the one that is, because that doesn't mean therapy won't work for you. It might mean I'm not the right person for you. And I think a lot of times people think every therapist is the same, whatever, and they just, oh, I started here, I should keep going, and it's not the right fit. And I think a lot of times that happens.
Mhm.
Or maybe they choose a therapist who doesn't have the right specialization. So,
Okay.
like, I specialize in working with moms.
Mhm.
So, moms come to me, that's my jam.
Mhm.
But say a mom were to come to me and her absolute primary thing that she's trying to work on is an addiction.
Okay.
I'm not an addiction therapist.
Mhm.
The right thing for me to do is to say, I think that an addiction therapist would be the right support for your addiction and to help you through that piece. And I could really help you through this. But maybe you go do that work first and then come back to me and I'll help you with the motherhood piece as you start to rebuild. And so, like, I think a lot of times everybody treats all therapists as if they're generalists, and it would be like assuming whatever doctor you go to could handle anything. And it's not true. We have oncologists, we have pediatricians, we have general practitioners, we have cardiologists, right? The same is true in therapy. And so being able to find the right fit for you is super important. That being said, I also passionately agree that therapy is not the only thing that could possibly help you.
Okay.
And so I am a woman of faith. I have seen God do huge things, but I've also seen him do huge things through therapists. I'll say that too. Like,
Right.
in the same way that, like, you can believe God can heal you from your cancer, but you might still go to an oncologist. And so it can be both. You don't have to go to a therapist because you're lacking faith.
Mhm.
You can go to a therapist because you believe God can use that therapist as part of your healing. So now, if you come from a background where you're like, no, I wouldn't go to the oncologist, we're just going to do a faith healing. Okay, then maybe a therapist doesn't make sense at all to you. But if you're the kind of person that would be praying for healing from your cancer and going and getting cancer treatment, then you can also be praying and asking for deliverance and all those things for mental health struggles, for trauma, and all of that.
That's a great answer. But it brings me to another question I want to ask you. Still around there, and then we're gonna move on. Like,
Yeah.
you talk to different people, and their stories have different concepts and perceptions. So I'm really eager to see your perspective on these things as well. So what would you say? Like, how would you, if you were to educate the fake people on being open to therapies as well as whatever practice or ministry you get from the church, what would you say? Because oftentimes there's this argument of, oh, when you have that issue, go for deliverance. But, a lot, I don't know if many people don't know or they do know that you have to take care of your soul. You have to take care of the process of the fragment, the damage that happened from when you were a child. Is it that we need to be educated in the church to understand these different levels of care and support that we need as well as our spirituality, or are we trading one for another, or is it that we're not utilizing our spirituality to heal that soul as well, like a therapist would? What is going there? What do we need? Do we need to be educated? And if so, can you give us some education around that today?
Hmm. Well, I think there's a couple of things. So, from like, depending on what your faith background is, you might have a lot of different thoughts on this. But there's a spiritual warfare piece that when I think of deliverance, I think a lot about spiritual warfare as being connected to that, as well as like also in like the healing ministries world, where it's not necessarily a spiritual warfare, but it could be like, in physical or mental health struggles. Um, I think when it's a spiritual warfare piece, like, yeah, that's a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But if we get biblical, you can look at like, there were times when Jesus healed by saying the demons need to get out, and then there were other times where he didn't bring up that at all. It was like, yeah, your legs are bad or you're blind. Like it wasn't all about being a spiritual warfare thing. So I think there's those two pieces. One piece of advice that I would always give any believer or any person of faith, that where faith, even if it's not Christian faith, wherever you're coming from, if faith is a really significant part of your life, to seek out a therapist that has the same worldview. So if you're a Christian and you want to do the deeper work, to seek out a Christian therapist. If you are Muslim or Hindu or whatever your background is, if it's a significant part of your life, that should be part of the things that you're screening a therapist for. And the reason I say that is, as a therapist who has a Christian faith background, I can tell you from the communities that I'm in of therapists that there can be some really negative viewpoints of people of faith. Um, it can be a very secular environment, and they can see, depending on faith and depending on God, as a crutch that they want to get you away from, and they want you to be self-reliant.
Oh,
Um, and so that's where I encourage, believers to find somebody that lines up with that. And if somebody's not willing to admit what their faith background is, then they're probably not the one for you. Um, so, so I think that that's a really important piece, because the people who come from the same worldview aren't going to be sitting there trying to tell you, you just need to rely on yourself. They are going to be open to you talking about integrating deliverance or integrating healing prayer, or like, those people are going to be open to it and may even have good knowledge about it. And so that way it doesn't feel like this dichotomy, or of, I'm going to this really secular therapist and what they're telling me doesn't line up with what my pastor is telling me, and how do I reconcile this in a, you know we want to get to a place where we're not feeling creating more division within a person, but can help them to be more unified in their approach. So number one piece of advice is, if faith is a big part of your life, to seek out a therapy provider who lines up with that.
so good. Thank you, Amy, for that piece of advice and really education as well. That is so clear. It brought a lot of clarity to me, and I know people that are listening would have the same clarity as well. So let's go to our this or that segment. It's been pretty intense. Okay, so I've got six pairs of words that I'm gonna throw at you, and you pick which one resonate with you, and maybe why. You don't have to explain if you don't want to. So the first one is grace or growth.
I have to go with Grace because it's my last name.
Oh yeah, so true. Okay, the next one, obedience or freedom.
Hmm. Ooh, that one's a hard one. Um, freedom to obey.
I love that. Well, I mean, I know that as a therapist, you're gonna go with freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, freedom to obey. That's a good way to put it. So the other one, generational breakthrough or generational blessing.
Mm. Generational breakthrough.
Why did you pick that one, if I may ask?
I think it's probably from my lens that I've worked with so many people that have had hard generational stories, generational abuse, generational struggles. And that they are, when I look past, I think generational breakthrough. When I look future, I think generational blessing. So, like, I think about like how we can break through the negative patterns of the past. And then I think about how we can bless the future generations that come from us.
From that breakthrough. Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. So the next one is crying in the shower or crying in church.
Oh, both are valuable. Gosh, I've cried in both places. Oh gosh. My deepest, hardest cries have always been in the shower. Yeah.
Dude.
My deepest ugly cries were like that is the shower for sure, but definitely have had plenty of worship cries in my life.
Right. Okay. So redirection or reinvention?
Hmm. Gosh, that's a challenging one too. Reinvention. And I feel like it's a collaborative process.
Okay.
Um that, often it goes very well with redirection, but then as we collaborate with God and ourselves, that we can reinvent together from there.
Right. Okay. So the last one for you is becoming or belonging.
Mm, gosh, these are such great ones. They're hard to like choose one or the other. I think I'm going to go belonging. That's the one that sticks out to me more. Like, I think we're all meant to be part of a community and to be in relationship, and we all have such a desire to belong in some way.
I love that too. I love belonging. Okay, Amy, thank you so much. I've got a couple of questions to ask you, personal ones, and then we're gonna speak to the women. What's
Yeah.
one truth that you live by now that you couldn't believe back then?
Whew. That even though life is not going the way I thought it was, that it can be even better than I ever thought it would be.
That's so good. That's so good. The other one came out from our conversation when we met earlier. You spoke up so much, faith, especially about how God redirected your life. From wanting
Hmm.
to become this beautiful, amazing surgeon to becoming this woman who is helping so many moms doing almost the same thing but in a different way. So you often say God will put you out, which He did for you. For the woman listening who is in her lowest moment, what would you say to her right now? In that kind
Mm,
of place, everything looks bleak for her, no hope, and she has this baby and children, and she's exhausted and she's tired. What would you say?
yeah. First of all, it's okay to admit that you're in a hard place, that you don't have to mask it and pretend like everything is fine. You don't have to pretend like you're filled with hope if reality is that you're not. You can accept and like embrace that this is a hard place. And I hope that you can find somebody who can hold hope for you in this period, that can hold on to the hope that there is a light at the end of this, that your baby won't be in diapers forever, that they won't even require childcare forever. There will come a time and a place where these little humans that are exhausting you right now feel like a huge blessing in your life, where you can leave the house and go buy food without bringing them, where you can see them becoming their own person and you can see them blessing others and you can delight in who they are and it will get better. Like it truly will. That doesn't mean it won't be hard at other times, but you, mama, can handle it. Like you truly can, whether it's on your own or with God or with a whole village of people. You can do this.
Hmm. Thank you so much. Where can people go to follow your work, learn more about everyday supermoms and connect with you and your message?
Yeah, if you love podcasts, please hop over to Everyday Supermoms. Each week, I interview a different mom and we talk about her personal story. It's not just preaching to you. So we hear her story and her super strengths, and then there's usually some good takeaway nuggets. And then you can find me on Instagram at Hey Amy Grace. Those are the two easiest ways to find me. But I'm also, my website is amygrace.bio. And I have all the information of all the things I do there. You can find my podcasts, you can find my courses, you can find out information about coaching if you want to work with me directly. If motherhood is not feeling like something you are loving, but feels like something you're surviving, please believe that it doesn't have to feel like that forever and reach out for some support.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy, for your warmth, your wisdom, and your honesty. You brought such great insights today, and I know that those who are listening would take so much note. Please make sure you share this podcast with this episode with your friends Share it with every woman you know. Share it in those moms groups so that they can get the help that they need, and also connect with Amy. If you need coaching and if you are in her state, you can log on and just book to work with her as your therapist. Thank you so much, Amy, for reminding us that the very thing we thought that will break us is often the very thing that God will use to be a birthing place for the
Mm.
extraordinary life that we are hoping to live. It's just going to come in a different way that we didn't see it. And your story has been a big example to us today. And just seeing the amazing work that you do with this beautiful human being that come to change this world in their own way, and supporting these women, support those little humans means everything. And I think, we want more of that in the world, to protect those little ones, because they are the future. They're the next generation. Thank you for being
Yes.
there when it's very important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you to our listeners and our friends. If this podcast again stirred something in you, let it. Don't stop it. Let it stir. Let it awaken. And let it invite you to a new place, a place of freedom, place of knowing that there's hope and that you can be free from whatever you are experiencing as a mom. Sit with it, journal about it, pass it on to another sister, to another woman who needs to know that her story still matters, her journey still matters. And like Amy just said, that it's going to change. It's going to get better. Those kids are not going to always be kids. You're going to be able to go to shops without them very soon. So
Yes.
and get the help that you need. And one thing I want to say before we go, Amy said, get a vision for you. It's not too late. Wherever you are with your children, with your motherhood, grab a piece of paper and begin to envision what you want for the big picture. Amy concept. So keep doing what you're doing, moms out there. We appreciate you. We love you. And don't forget to subscribe, comment, and visit us on www.dylischi.com for our events and for more support and session and growth and inspiring words that you want to have come into your life. We have that join our newsletter so we can send you that weekly as well. Until next time, my friends, keep being the amazing moms that you are. Whatever you're doing is good enough, and we love you. If this conversation spoke to you today, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs it. And be sure to follow Build the Life You Love on your favorite podcast platform so you can never miss an episode. And if this resonated with you, leave a comment, share your thoughts, and help us spread this movement of living boldly, building deeply, and loving fully. To explore my latest offerings, sessions, and ways to go deeper on your journey, visit www.dylischi.com. You can also connect with me on social media. Just search for @Dylis Chi everywhere. This is how we build the life we love together. Until next time, stay rooted, stay rising, and stay true to yourself.